Hello and welcome to the Achieve Goals Fast podcast. Discover the fastest ways to transform your career, finances, relationships, and personal life.
Hey everyone, and Happy New Year to you. I'm looking forward to a great 2019 and to bringing you more excellent content to assist you in at least some small way in your professional development. And on that note, I thought we could all benefit from considering the topic of establishing and most importantly achieving meaningful personal and professional goals. At the heart of our patient care is establishing and working toward objective goals. And so why shouldn't we be establishing clear goals, developing a plan toward those goals, measuring progress along the way, and identifying when we achieve them and modifying them to accomplish even more. And so, I've learned a bit about Mike and his book, and I've heard his personal story. And while I don't endorse everything Mike proposes, I believe we can take away some important lessons from what he has for us. So a lot more on goals coming up in just a bit. First, a quick welcome to newest subscribers to my free weekly newsletter: Eric, Manola, Andre, Scott, Umaid, Zach, Marzena, Tomas, Susan, Nabil, and Alika. And you can sign up too to keep up with new episodes, access important resources, enjoy discounted products and services which have helped me along the way, and keep up to date with other projects. So sign up at mechanicalcareforum.com. So I've had several listeners reach out to me over the last few weeks about an interest in a cash practice. This has been in response to me mentioning my mastermind meeting with about 6 other cash or hybrid, that is cash or third-party payer practices, and following my prior episodes with Laura Mannery. I mentioned how in our mastermind group we've been comparing notes, cataloging helpful resources and not so helpful resources, best practices when it comes to all things necessary to building and developing a successful cash practice, and we've also been establishing some goals and assisting each other by keeping each other accountable and encouraging each other along the way. So let me mention again that we're in the process of providing a resource for any of you who have similar ideals and similar frustrations in the traditional practice models. You know, the type of PT models which allow insurances to dictate how much you're reimbursed for your services, and the type of practices that require you to see a large volume of patients just to stay afloat. One that asks you to compromise your principles and deliver services you know have little to no benefit to the patient. One that requires you to fudge a little on how many units you bill because of the company's quotas. And one that leaves you working on a ton of documentation after hours. If you're like Laura, who had mentioned in episodes 243 and 244, and like I've alluded to in times past, are frustrated and want a better situation, and a cash practice sounds of interest, please contact me on my Contact Us page at mechanicalcareforum.com. You won't be required to do anything or commit to anything yet. It'll simply let me know you're interested in the idea. And especially if you're interested in the idea, but in the back of your mind it sounds too good to be true, or it feels like it would be too unstable or too much of a risk, just shoot me a quick message and let me know. I'm more and more convinced it's not out of reach, even if you don't live in the most affluent area, or even if you have no prior business experience, or have a family to provide for, and are still paying on that school debt, or whatever the limiting beliefs are. Go to mechanicalcareforum.com and type cash practice in the subject line in that message to me. Okay, let's move on and let me introduce my guest today. Mr. Mike Pettigrew is a best-selling author and has been a successful entrepreneur since he was a teenager. He's found, bought, built, and sold more than 15 businesses. He's widely recognized as an expert in helping ordinary people achieve extraordinary goals. Mike is also the creator of several products, courses, and coaching programs that help those who want to achieve more and live a more fulfilling life. He's the author of the book, The Most Powerful Goal Achievement System in the World. Here's part 1 of my interview with Mr. Mike Pettigrew. Enjoy. So with me today on the Mechanical Care Forum, I'm happy and excited to welcome Mr. Mike Pettigrew. Mike, so glad to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Jason. Thanks so much.
Mike, you have a good story. You've got some good work that you're doing. I'm excited to share that with the listeners today. But first, let me just give you an opportunity to just tell us where you are, Mike, and what you do.
Sure. I'm actually physically located in Ireland. I'm right out in the countryside, farms all around us, lovely place. I decided about 20 years ago to get out of the city finally. So living in a beautiful place. And well, basically I help people, ordinary people, achieve extraordinary goals. And I think the greatest gift, and I mentioned this when we were speaking before we started the podcast, the greatest gift we can give another human being is empowerment. When people are empowered, they can transform their lives. They can achieve their life's biggest dreams. But the sad reality is so many people today feel so disempowered. And what the work that I do is I help empower people to achieve their dreams again. The things that in many cases they've given up on. You know, we've all reached the 1st of January, look back over the previous year, and all those goals we haven't achieved, or the year before, you know, there's always this set of goals that go from year to year to year. And there's a reason why people don't achieve their goals. There's a reason. And firstly, people don't use a system. Most people just don't use a system. But there are specific things you need to do to transform your life in wonderful ways. When you do it, it's amazing things can happen. Amazing things can happen. But if you leave it up to chance, unfortunately, the year rolls around, 1st of January comes around again, and you've got all these disappointments. And instead of being empowered, you're disempowered. You start to grow disillusioned. And that's really sad, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, excited to hear more about these specific things. We're both kind of on the heels of dealing with a little cold, so we'll just announce that right now, right? Mike, you certainly have a story behind what has led you to work in this area, what has made you passionate about these ideas. Can you give us a bit of the backstory and helping us understand where you came from and maybe major influences that have kind of directed your work and your excitement toward this area?
Absolutely. Well, I think when you have a really big passion in life to help a lot of people, it usually comes from having experienced some real hardship in the past and overcoming that, a deep desire to help other people, you know, avoid such situations. For me, I started my first business when I was only 15, you know, and then I started a real business back in 1987, 25 years old, and I started my first company. We used to rent tropical plants to offices, and I noticed how the first few years, now this, you know, if you look at the statistics, most businesses fail in their first 5 years. And for me, I was just on a financial roller coaster, feast or famine. 1 year there'd be, 1 month there'd be lots of money. Next month I could barely feed myself. I was getting sick of this. I was getting really sick of this. And to cut a long story short, and we can go into this a little bit later if you like, but basically my financial situation or my lack of finances was down to my own lack of self-worth. I doubted myself. I berated myself. I felt guilty about asking my clients for payment. And that's what life gave me, a roller coaster of financial problems. But I overcame that. I developed great self-esteem. I doubled my prices to my clients, expecting to lose half of them. And you know what? Only 12 months later, my business started making serious profit. And that was the beginning of many, many amazing years in business. And when I started my first business, I was saying my first real business in 1987, I had this big desire that in 10 years' time, that would be 1997, 10 years in the future, I wanted to spend all my time doing voluntary work, or at least, you know, a couple of days a week. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, having low self-esteem and having that financial roller coaster, that was never going to happen. So when I built up my self-worth, my self-value, my business started taking off, I reached the stage in 1995, I think it was, 1996, I started only working a day and a half a week. I had a great lifestyle, a great income. And I spent most of my time doing voluntary work. I used to do hospice volunteer work, sitting with people who were in the last few weeks and months of their life. And, I just loved doing that, really making a difference. And then in 2001, I sold my company to a multinational. I thought I'd take an early retirement, but life often has in store for us all sorts of twists and turns we couldn't possibly imagine. And to be honest, Jason, I trusted the wrong people. I trusted two individuals I shouldn't have trusted. I made some really bad investments. And just a few years later, around 2004, our son was born and I had no money to feed him, my wife, or myself. In 1 year, the year prior to that, we'd lost $250,000 euros. That's even more than in dollars.
Right.
And there was a series of years like that. I can't even begin to describe how frightening it was, because when it comes down to the survival of your loved ones, nothing more frightening. I mean, if I had been single, maybe, it would have been easier to start again. But when you've got loved ones and you can't support them, there's nothing more frightening or humiliating than, I think, a threat to the survival of our loved ones. And every morning I just woke up and I wanted to throw up with the fear every single morning. I went from a person of lots of self-confidence, lots of self-esteem, which I'd built up over years, to starting doubting myself and berating myself, and blaming myself and hating myself to have got my little family into such an awful situation. So in a way, Jason, it's like the previous 10, 15 years, 16, 17 years, actually, I had discovered the power of positive thinking, the power of positive thought. And now I had to discover the opposite, the power of negative thinking. And I think I had to discover what most people go through, a huge number of people go through, because I'm absolutely convinced of this. Our dominant thoughts and our dominant emotions actually create the circumstances of our life. And for me, getting up every morning, petrified, full of fear, and expecting more bad stuff to happen, absolutely, not expecting it, but absolutely in every fiber of my being, knowing bad stuff is going to happen. So like I was almost commanding it from the universe, because our world around us is a reflection of how we are inside. So if we're pumping out all these negative thoughts and emotions all of the time, you might say they're almost like negative prayers, and our prayers are always answered. So I was just creating more loss for ourselves, for my little family. So it got so bad, Jason, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I vowed with every fiber of my being to the universe. It was the most impassioned prayer I've ever made in my entire life. I said, show me what I need to do. I will do anything. Show me. Probably the first time I'd actually said, show me. And I was flabbergasted by what happened. Only one day later, through coincidences, I picked up a book written over 100 years ago. And that book was all about the power of gratitude. And reading this book, I realized, my goodness, I've sunk so low. I've gone from a person of gratitude and positivity to someone who has been for a couple of years feeling the opposite. And I realized even back then, my dominant thoughts and emotions were perpetuating it, but it was almost like a vicious circle. I couldn't consciously get out of it until I picked up this book. So I decided, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I've got to change my dominant thoughts and my dominant feelings, and there's a good chance things will start to change. So I did what today I call my crazy gratitude experiment. And what I did was I brought up gratitude every 30 minutes of the day. And you might think, how on earth can you bring up gratitude every 30 minutes when you're feeling so terrible? Well, as human beings, we have this amazing capability within ourselves to change our internal state if we choose to do so. So the way I did this was I remembered a time in the past where I had felt absolutely huge, deep gratitude, incredibly profound gratitude. I dwelt on that memory for a few minutes, and eventually I'd start to feel gratitude starting to bubble up. Now, when you do this every 30 minutes of the day, you get quite good at it. And at the end of the first day, our situation hadn't physically changed, but I felt different. I felt different for the first time in well over a year, maybe 2 years. But the amazing thing is that the synchronicities, incredible coincidences that affect me profoundly to this day, started 3 days later. I got a phone call from an old competitor. He knew I sold my business. He thought I was stinking rich, and I had been. I was just too embarrassed to tell him the truth. He said, "Hi, Mike, how are things going?" I said, "Oh, great, yeah." "How are you?" And, I just steered the conversation towards him. I was just too embarrassed to tell him what had happened.
Sure.
And he told me something that has changed my life. It was about advertising. This was 2004, late 2004. And he said, "Mike, I'm getting an amazing amount of business from these new Google AdWords." And I said, "What are they?" He said, when you're searching for something, you have these little ads on the side of the page. Now they're up at the top. But anyway, I said, "Yeah, tell me more." And he said, "Oh, I'm getting so much new business just by using this new form of advertising." And cut a long story short, now years later, I have a very successful marketing company, and we spend thousands every day. We spend thousands on Google AdWords, Facebook, and Bing advertising, online advertising. It all started from that phone call. And that happened 3 days after I started changing my dominant thoughts and emotions from fear and hating myself to gratitude and appreciation. Everything changed. It's amazing how, I think it's a bit like pulling the corner of a spider's web. We just change one aspect of our lives and everything in our life changes. When we pull the corner of the spider's web, the entire web changes shape. So when we start bringing up gratitude and living a life of gratitude, every single aspect of our lives changes. Gratitude acts like a magnet. Usually we feel really grateful when something wonderful happens, but I'm a firm believer in cause and effect. And I believe that gratitude is a cause, the effect of which is amazing things in other people's lives and our own lives. So just the act of being more grateful, it throws light on all sorts of problems we may have. It allows us to see more clearly. It allows us to start seeing things as they really are rather than the illusion we see. So I think everything for me started from this book and gratitude. Now, years later, you may think that I look back at that horrendous time as being the worst time of my life, and it was, but it's the most important experience I've had in my life, because it's taught me so much about positive thought, negative thought, and it's given me this absolute burning desire to share with other people how to transform their lives quickly if they are in a difficult situation, but also to achieve their life's biggest dreams, the things that they've actually given up on. So sorry for being so long-winded, but that's what really got me started. And it gives me incredible joy to see people who test my system in my bestseller, The Most Powerful Goal Achievement System in the World. They test it and they get results. That just makes it all worthwhile, and it's just such a simple system, but it contains some factors that don't appear in other goal achievement formulas. I mean, some of the best formulas out there, systems, they're 30 or 40 steps, and most people won't even get started because of that's overwhelm, but simplicity, little baby steps added together turn into giant leaps forward. We all need to gain confidence, and in order to gain confidence, we need proof that what we're testing actually works. And when you get that proof early, you can set bigger goals and bigger goals and bigger goals, and your confidence and self-esteem builds. It's just wonderful. I often think of it as like a snowball rolling down a hill. It gathers snow as it rolls down the hill, So I think we can go from being very weak and very disillusioned and pessimistic or even cynical to totally transforming our lives. And we can do it quite quickly, certainly within a year,
Yeah, I'm excited to hear a little bit more. Tell me more about the actual principles that you found in addition to the gratitude you're speaking of that were simple and not 40 steps, but fewer, and help us understand, some of those ways that you found that you really started seeing you achieve goals.
Absolutely. Well, Jason, there are really 7 basic steps. And a lot of these steps, they're common to other goal achievement systems because universal principles are universal principles.
Yeah.
But I think that the first thing that we need to do when trying to achieve anything is to become really clear on what we want. And I've met so many people over the years who I've asked, I often ask people, what are your biggest dreams? What do you want to achieve by the time you leave this world? And often when I ask people this question, their sort of face goes blank and they go, and they're not sure. And I think the reason is that life is so busy. Life is hard. At the end of the day, we all pretty much work pretty hard. Most people work very, very hard. At the end of the day, they're exhausted. They want to just switch on the TV and, distract themselves. By the time the weekend rolls around, the last thing that they want to think about is planning their life, because it's just too big a thing to even conceive. So most people don't really know what they truly want to create in their lives. Mm-hmm. And if we don't get really clear on what we want, generally we just end up reacting to changing circumstances. So the first step is really becoming clear on what we want. And there's a really simple way to do this. So you can become really clear on what you want certainly within 1 hour, if you take the time to do this. And it's just getting an A4 sheet of paper, writing down on that piece of paper everything you want to achieve during your life. Things that you've given up on, years ago. Dreams you had as a kid that after you've had a few hard knocks in your 20s and 30s, you think, no, that's not possible anymore, So just brainstorm, get out on a piece of paper, all those things, even if they seem crazy. Now, you can cross off the crazy ones from your list later, but the first step is that just to start doing this brainstorming session, because when we do brainstorming like this, when we start taking action, start writing things down, I believe our intuition kicks in. I believe we connect with the higher consciousness. I believe that we start having ideas we wouldn't have had before. It's to kickstart creativity. All we have to do is get started. Amazing things happen. So that's the first step, becoming really clear on what we want. And then once we're clear on what we want, we also need to look at each of our goals honestly and find out our big reason why. I remember back in the early 90s when I was starting to experience the first effects of my success, I started buying things, lots of things, new cars and new gadgets and toys and top-of-the-range BMWs and all that sort of thing. I thought, yes, nice. I became quite materialistic for a while. And I'm really glad I did, because I discovered quite quickly how empty those things are. After a couple of months, they did not make any difference to my life whatsoever. Mm-hmm. I'm glad I learned that back then. But you know what? We may have goals, but by looking at each of our goals, being really scrutinizing each of our goals, we can discover whether it's deeply meaningful or if it's just helping us avoid something. Mm. For me, I liked the nice car because it made me feel successful. Now, did I need the car to feel successful? Not at all. But I think there's a very simple exercise to do here. Write down the goal and put after, I want to achieve whatever the goal is, so that, and then answer the so that. And then you repeat that. Okay, I want a new top of the range so that I feel successful. Next step would be, I want to feel successful so that, and you drill down, keep drilling down. And usually by around about the seventh, so that, you get a surge of energy, of power, of emotion. And it's usually at that point, this is only if it's deeply meaningful. Mm-hmm. If there's no surge of power and, if you do this so that exercise and you come down, it was to a simple, you may discover that your goal is just helping you avoid the fact that you have low self-esteem. So, this is just one example, but doing this so that exercise, it can enable us to avoid spending endless amount of time chasing after goals that are completely meaningless or that don't give us the satisfaction that they could. So that's important. So deciding what we want, drilling down, finding our big reason why for each goal. And the next step is to create highly charged goals, because you know what, if we don't feel strongly about our goals, we're not going to put much effort into them. Life, if we want to achieve big dreams, we need to feel excited about them. Napoleon Hill, the author of Think and Grow Rich, over 100 years ago, about 100 years ago, he said we need to summon up a burning desire. So if we don't feel strongly or passionately about our goals, it's very difficult to achieve them. But in my book, I go into a way of, and unfortunately there's not enough time to go into the process because it's a little bit involved, but it's a way of emotionalizing our goals, putting excitement into our goals whenever we think about them. And the difference in the forward momentum is incredible. If we feel strongly towards our goals and they excite us, it's like rocket power. But if we feel nothing happens. We just stand still. So this is one of the factors that makes this system a little bit different from other goal achieving systems. It goes into how to emotionalize your goals. The next step, number 3, the 7 steps in the system, is give each goal a deadline. Short-term, medium-term, long-term goals. That's in every system on the planet. I think that goes for itself. Obviously, we only set our short-term goals maybe next couple of months, 2-3 months. We don't set huge goals because we're going to fall flat in our face. Mm-hmm. We won't achieve them and we become disillusioned, and that has the opposite effect that we need. So it's important to set small short-term goals, slightly bigger medium-term goals over the next year or two. Next 5 years, 10 years, long-term goals can be absolutely huge. But you know what happens as we start achieving our short-term goals and we develop confidence and we start to see how powerful this is, a lot of our long-term goals can move into our medium-term goals. It's amazing how, as our capability grows, we find that goals that we thought were almost semi-impossible become quite possible. So that giving a goal a deadline. Now, the next step, number 4.
And there you go with episode 245. I'm hopeful this conversation with Mike will encourage us all to get a bit more serious and organized about achieving specific goals this year. I appreciate Mike's recognition that one of the greatest gifts we can give others is empowerment. That's certainly right down our alley and aligned with our goals. It also sounds like a good experiment to make a habit of recognizing and calling to mind gratitude, just like Mike did. And there are 7 steps, according to Mike, to achieve our goals. The first 3, become clear of what you want and find out your reason why. Create highly charged goals, ones that provoke passion in us and excite us. And give each goal a deadline, setting small short-term goals and bigger long-term goals. Be sure to come back next week to hear the conclusion of our conversation as well as the rest of the goals and some good practical exercises to facilitate achieving these goals.
Thank you so much for joining me today, and I do hope you found it helpful. To get free books, videos, and training programs that will help you to achieve your goals 10 times faster, visit my website at achievegoalsfast.com. That website again is achievegoalsfast.com. Also, remember to share this podcast with your friends and anyone you feel might benefit from it. Again, thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to speaking with you again very soon.